Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey friends, Jason here. During this holiday season, I wanted to take an opportunity to re-release some of the most popular episodes of Distribution Talk. My August 2020 interview with Lisa Fiore, co-founder and CEO of Landscape Hub, broke all download records for the show. People were intrigued with her ability to apply this digital marketplace to the highly fragmented legacy industry of landscape supply. Since our interview, their platform has grown dramatically, and they're continuing to add more robust search features for the end user. From a fingernails in the dirt family business to technology-driven service provider, this is a really cool innovation story. I hope you enjoy this previously recorded conversation. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSQL Distribution Software. InSQL is a fully functional distribution-based software package, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. Another thing I like about this company is they do it all in-house. They take on these applications and build them into the platform using state-of-the-art Microsoft technology. No third-party bolt-ons for them. This is important because when you need technical assistance, they are the single point of contact. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSQL Distribution Software at www.insql.com. That's INXSQL.com. All right, Lisa. Hey, welcome to Distribution Talk. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me, Jason. It's great to get reconnected after all these years with you.
God, I know. As we were talking about it, it's been a long time. I mean, from the ANLA. One of the things I loved about that meeting was I'd never, been to Louisville.
Yep.
Oh, God, I really loved it there. It was so pretty.
Yep. It was a great town, great hotel.
Great hotel. Oh, fantastic. The Gold House was phenomenal. I mean, Gorgeous hotel.
Yep.
So, yeah. And then actually one of the funny things, we were on a break and I went down and saw the Muhammad Ali Museum there.
That's right.
I think it was a couple blocks down from the hotel.
That's right.
One of my favorite places in the world. I mean, that was an astounding place.
Yeah, I find myself down in Louisville regularly for business, and I certainly miss the clinic days, but it's always great to go back to Louisville.
Yeah, I do need to get back there eventually. If you could, give us a little history lesson, how you started in distribution, family biz,
Sure.
A whole shooting match.
Sure. My story starts about 100 years ago when my great-grandfather, an Italian immigrant, came over from Italy. Okay. And he actually immigrated to Chicago, poor immigrant with no shoes. He literally came over with no shoes and started out in Chicago working for some wealthy landowners. And he was a repairman. Okay. And this is a true story of how Fiore Nursery got started. So he was out repairing, I think it was a door at a wealthy industrialist estate up in the North Shore. And the owner asked my father while he was there repairing, he asked if he could plant a tree. And so like any good entrepreneur, he said, sure. So he went out and bought 2 trees, one for the homeowner, and he planted it. And he bought the second tree, he planted it in his backyard. And that's literally how the nursery got started 100 plus years ago. So Fiore Nursery was started by my great-grandfather, and it eventually turned into a large production growing operation in the Midwest. They grew trees and shipped those trees by rail across the country. And fast forward, the second generation really pivoted the business from production and got into distribution. Okay, so this was about 35 years ago. The second and third generation basically sold all the production land and got into the distribution model. And that's the business model that I entered into about 20 years ago. I worked for my father and uncle and immersed myself in all aspects of the business, got involved in buying and selling and operations, met you along the way. Yep. And from there, I took over the company as president during the awesome years of 2009 and 2010. Okay, actually, I became president in 2010, right? And so there's 2 different stories in my family. My father and uncle, I remember basically, when we lost about, I think it was 50% of our revenue in
Yeah.
2009, my father and uncle said, like, holy, what are we going to do? Their version of the story is that I grabbed the business and took it from them. My version is they gave it to me because it was a stressful time. So I took over the business in
Right.
2010. I stabilized it as best as I could, and then I put it in a position to grow. And it was during that time, that I started just becoming fixated on how we can optimize the operations, how we can optimize,
Mhm.
the internal processes. And, I started to focus on the supply chain. And I
Mhm.
saw, my vertical, and the
Yeah.
supply chain is super fragmented. It's
I'm
all
glad you said it.
it,
You can say it. I can't, but okay.
great people, great product, but it's a mess.
Wonderful. Yes.
It's a mess.
Yeah.
To say it's inefficient is an understatement. And so I just
Yeah.
started to think about ways that we could optimize the supply chain. And that's really, I started to think about building a software for the family company. And that
Mhm.
that eventually evolved into, hey, let's build a software that, the whole industry could potentially benefit from.
If I could for a second, maybe go back to that transition again. Yes, either taken or given, one of the two versions of the story.
Yeah.
What was that like though, when you had to, basically come out of a very, very rough time? I mean, and I can remember that time very well. I spent a lot of time in the construction related markets, and it's very similar to what you all have in the landscape side. What was it like with the employee base? Obviously, you had to let some people go. That's not the easiest thing in the world. But how did you instill confidence in them that you were going to actually take them in a different direction?
At the time, it was so, everyone in the industry and out of the industry was recognizing that we were in a global meltdown. And so it was, in a way, that global crisis allowed us to have very candid conversations with the family and with the team. And so we were very open from the very beginning. And from the outset, it was full transparency as to what we were facing. So I think because it was so widespread, it helped the team fully appreciate that this was not a unique situation that we were in. But it was so challenging. We lost 50% of our revenue in 1 year. We lost 15 points of gross profit. And there's no
Hmm.
way that we could have avoided
Yeah.
massive losses, even with doing pay cuts, even with layoffs. Ultimately the stakeholder, the owners of the business, obviously absorbed the largest hit. But it took us, I would say, 3 years to really properly contract. No one
Hmm.
understood, I think, how long and how deep and how serious the recession was going to be. So it took us a
Right.
couple of years to really kind of respond. But then we, of course, responded and adapted. And it was interesting. Ultimately, the thing that I remember about that time period was having the conversation with my father and uncle, the outgoing management team, and the existing team. And it was like, to stay the same, because we had always been extremely successful. We enjoyed
Hmm.
tremendous growth and profitable success for all the years that Fiore had been around. And I remember saying to everybody, like, to stay the same, we have to change. I think it's a Shakespeare
Right.
quote, right? I
Okay.
think, but to stay the same, we have to change. And I didn't know necessarily what we had to change to, or I just knew that we were going to have to change. And at the time, again, we were trying to feel our way forward, but ultimately we were always a high margin business up until that point. And
Yeah.
ultimately what came out of it was, hey, we need to have more diverse product lines. We can't just have this one product line. We need to diversify our product line. And we need to think about price a lot differently than we've always had. So that was certainly a big life lesson. And one of my biggest turning points in my career was evolving through that crisis.
Yeah. Do you feel like without that kind of pain, those painful lessons, do you think you would be as successful today? Or is that something that was required or
I
necessary?
totally think it was required. I'm grateful for it. We all have deep scars from the recession, and I guarantee you we're all going to have deep scars of living through this crazy
Yep.
pandemic. But yeah, I'm absolutely, it has shaped me and it's informed my, instincts, as it relates to business and just
Yeah.
personal life.
Do you think you're better prepared for this pandemic? Were you better prepared than maybe some of your younger cohorts out there?
I think so. What I learned was, I remember literally in the beginning, I remember in the fall when I think it was Bear Stearns fell, like that was kind of the beginning. And I remember having
Yes.
a conversation. I'm like, oh my God, we might have to do a pay cut with my team. And it was so insignificant, the numbers that we were toying around with in terms of like our
Right.
targeted cuts. And so the lesson that I learned was, once there's a black swan event, like you have to, yeah, you don't want to act in haste. of course.
Right.
But
Right.
there is serious risk by not acting fast enough. I think the lesson was you have to act swift, you have to act meaningfully, and of course to do
Hmm.
it with compassion with your team and to do it as thoughtfully as possible. But I will always err on responding faster than not because of that recession.
Yeah, and I think that really bodes well into your new adventure here that you jumped into, where if you do not move fast, I
Yeah.
mean, you're in trouble there.
Yes.
As a pivot, there, could you tell us a little bit about your adventure that you moved into? Well, first of all, when did it start?
So Landscape Hub, that's the business that I launched,
Yes.
was born out of my experience at Fiore. Okay. And so
Yeah.
it was while I was running my family company that I started to again conceptualize the idea of building a software to help optimize the supply chain, right? And
Hmm.
so I became fixated on it and I realized that I could not pursue this while I couldn't wing walk. Okay. I'm good at multitasking, but I couldn't run two companies, one being
Right.
a venture high growth company. So I had the tough conversation with my family.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, I am so clear that this is the future of the industry and I have to be a part of it. And I have to see this thing through. And so, with their blessings, I left the company and launched Landscape Hub. So, Landscape Hub is a response to me living firsthand in this supply chain, right? And so the
Right.
vertical is the nursery and landscape space. So
Yep.
it's a massive market. Okay, it's about $100 billion market. 30 billion is roughly
Hmm.
green goods, which is where I was living, and
Yeah.
70 billion is hard lines. And so I was subject to this just terrible inefficiencies as a result of the supply base being offline,
Hmm.
non-digital, non-digitized. And so sure, yeah, everyone has a little website, but nobody had their product offering or their catalog in a searchable format. I found it to be ridiculous, and the downstream effects that it had on my business as a distributor was unacceptable. And then the further downstream effects that it had on my consumers or my commercial buyers, it just was compounding. And so I saw very clearly that this industry was the last bastion of this non-digitized space. I wanted to be
Yeah.
the one that brought us into the new technological era. So I love the space, I love the industry, and I felt
Yeah.
that I could do it in a way that it could bring value to both sides of the market.
Yeah, and I mean there are some inherent challenges, in the green space, especially on the green side. And the hardscape side, not as much,
Yep.
but in the green side, if you look at a plant, it is the same species. It could be the same height tree, but there's variations. I mean, and there are subtle variations
Yeah.
between the two. And to digitize that and to really standardize that, that's difficult. I mean, that's challenging.
Yeah. So my co-founder at Landscape Hub is Chad Cooper. So when I
Hmm.
left the company, my first objective was to find a co-founder that was tech enabled because I'm not, right. I
Sure.
understand the business and the industry, but I'm not tech savvy. So I sought out a technical co-founder, met Chad Cooper, who happened to be this, Ohio born and raised, humble technologist who had 20 plus years of digital marketplace experience. He was
Yeah.
at Home Finder and apartments.com, where he standardized, oddly enough, all the
Yeah.
MLS data. Okay, so here's this guy that I met
Right. Okay.
who loves data, who's standardized messy data before. Oh, and by the way, he was the tech guy that basically led Grubhub. He was the tech
Right.
guy that built Grubhub. And so we got together and he studied the space, and his eyes was just fell out of his head because he was like, oh my gosh, like this is solvable. Let's go solve it.
Yeah.
And so to your point, not only
Yeah.
the products, there's a long tail of products in the space. To think
Yeah.
about all the products that you find in a commercial or residential project, hard and green, it's just massive proliferation of SKUs. But again, the lack of standardization that the industry hasn't had, because the same tree that exists in one zone that exists in another zone has multiple aliases. No one can agree on a name. And
Right.
so
Right.
so we set out, our first objective was to create a standard. Not that we never expected anybody to adopt the standard, but we've created this bi-directionally mapped database. So
Hmm.
when we bring a supplier onto Landscape Hub, we map their data to ours. So
Hmm.
that allows a buyer to come in, call up a plant by his or her own nomenclature, and we can match
Hmm.
them. So we've created this massive database basically that identifies the way people talk about plants,
Hmm.
packages, sizes, and plant attributes. And that's the core That's the core, I would say, asset of Landscape Hub is our database.
Absolutely. I mean, you've taken this massively confusing world out there and at least gotten it a little closer.
Correct.
I mean, I can imagine, there are still those who find it frustrating because you're not calling it what they call it.
But actually, so you're right. But we're enabling them to call it however they want to call it because it's bi-directional. So they can call a plan in their language. We know what it is that they're referring to. And so anytime, we can feed it back to them in their language, or we can convert it. So we can translate what it is that they're referring to. And that's cool. Not that's necessary for someone to search on our database, but it also allows us to connect. So to kind of take it a step further. So yes, we are a marketplace. So people can sell their product at Landscape Hub and people can buy product on Landscape Hub. But beyond the marketplace, we're also able to connect all the systems that buyers and suppliers are using because of this data translating that we can do. So we integrate with software companies that contractors are using to run their business and doing estimates out of. And when they want to do an order, that order flows all the way through our platform into the system of that the supplier is using. So it's truly connecting what was once probably the most fragmented, disconnected ecosystem out there. We're trying to connect everybody.
A whole lot of handwriting and a whole lot of translation. And I can remember too. I can remember somebody backing up to the end of the yard and saying, well, I want this. And you got to figure, okay, I'm going to scratch it down on my paper and run back here, try to figure out how to put it into a software package. Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. And when did you leave officially and say, I'm starting this?
So it was officially in the winter of 2017 that I stepped away from the family company, and we launched our first MVP in the summer of 17. And then we closed our first round of fundraising in the fall of 17. So we are venture backed. We've raised over $9 million since we first launched in the fall of 17. But we have amazing investors that have done this before, and they provide not just capital, but expertise. And so I don't think we could have done this if we had a mandate to be profitable. We couldn't do it.
It's really interesting. So how was that transition? I mean, going from the family business, where decisions were made at a table and maybe, some colorful language being thrown about during that time, to now working with, some folks who do demand, some results, and they're pushing you forward at a rate maybe that wasn't the same type of rate you were being pushed at before.
So very different world. And leaving a lifestyle business or a family business to go to a venture-backed business for me was like a breath of fresh air. My family company was run with, I would say, a fair amount of governance. I mean, sure, it's family, but we imposed a fair amount of rules of the road that we allowed, to kind of run the business. There was governance that I came from, but to go to a boardroom that consists of, venture capitalists and, operators of big time companies, I found to be incredibly refreshing. I love the demands. I mean, I'm going to push myself regardless of who I'm reporting to. That's just kind of in my DNA, but I just found it to be very refreshing.
It's interesting, Lisa, a lot of people are pretty terrified of that world, and they look at that world and they really don't consider those options to fund their business or to fund an idea or an expansion because, it's a fearful approach. They feel like that their personality or the culture they've grown up in is not going to mesh with that world. And it sounds like you were able to make that mesh pretty well, or that transition pretty well.
There's obviously, it's a learning curve. For me, it wasn't just a natural transition for me. Early on, I was just fortunate enough to meet some people that understood that world, came from that world, and I grabbed onto them as mentors and advisors. And so for me to transition from family business world to venture-backed high growth world, I didn't pretend that I knew what I was doing. And I sought out people that could help me transition and help fill that knowledge gap. And you don't pretend that, you know what you know, and you shouldn't pretend what you don't know.
Well, I think at least as I get older, humility becomes a very big asset. The more vulnerable you are and the more humble you are, the more people are willing to, to really give of themselves and really share things with you that maybe if you came in thinking you knew everything, that that would be shut out from you.
Well, I feel like there's so many successful people. Like my sense is the vast majority of successful people in this world have had assistance from someone else. And I'm not shy of asking for help. And I'm not shy, and I'm certainly not stingy when it comes to giving my assistance to someone else who asks me. So I'm definitely not a shy person, and I'm not afraid to call someone and be like, how should I be looking at this? Can you help? Can you get me into this person? Can you help do an introduction? That's just how I think how everyone's success is somewhat born in that way.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how, that vulnerability will allow you to move somewhere forward? I was fortunate. Somebody recommended a TED Talk with Brene Brown.
She's amazing. I love her.
Yeah. Phenomenal. I mean, that's the one that just blew me away, the power of vulnerability. And I thought, oh, that's phenomenal. So good. So let's go back into into Landscape Hub. And you launched it, as you said, in
2017, the summer of 17. Yep.
Okay. You got a few. Now, were the suppliers most interested? Were the landscapers most interested? Who was really the catalyst for building this thing?
Building a marketplace is certainly, it's an art. It's a highly nuanced art. And so the vast majority of suppliers, 75% of the suppliers that we pitch to agree to come on. That being said, suppliers, and I should say nurseries tend to be very skeptical. So they say yes, but they tend to be skeptical. The hardline, the manufacturers, we have over 200 hardline suppliers waiting to come on to sell. So it's more of a natural, I think they get it a little bit easier. But the green goods suppliers have been very skeptical. The landscapers, the commercial buyers that we pitch to, they are very excited by it. There's no cost to them. So there's really very little risk for them. But they are B2B, right? This is a B2B transaction. And, even though there's no cost to them, we're still changing their behavior. And so the efforts that we put forth are much stronger on the buyer side at this early stage because it's their behavior that we're trying to change, get them to leave their offline, more inefficient behavior, come online, and they have to trust that this platform is going to adequately meet their needs because it's business to business. And so this is their job. So they need to get comfortable with the platform. And so both sides are intrigued. Buyers, I think, get it relatively quickly, but it still takes time to, erode that offline behavior.
Okay, now that you've started the marketplace, you've got it going here. Did you start in the Midwest primarily? Is that the kind of your target audience originally? And
Yep. So we started it in Chicago, where I had obviously a turnkey marketplace with my background, and then we expanded into other Midwest markets. And so now we have buyers from 46 states, but primarily the markets that we're active in are Midwest, Mid-Atlantic, and the South and the Southeast. So that's kind of our core markets. And we're going to probably stay there for the next 2 years and really penetrate deeper into those markets before we go elsewhere. But we're always opportunistic.
Sure. So what are some of the big hurdles that you ran into? You had a great idea. You got a great technologist to join you. You were moving along, and I'm sure you saw some early success, some early adopters, people getting excited. What was that first big challenge or that big gotcha moment?
Honestly, like it hit every other day. There's highs and lows, oftentimes in one day. I would say, even though what we've built has been built and has been executed and been adopted in other verticals, right? So what we're building is certainly it's been a playbook that others have deployed and have had success in. Obviously, we're the first ones doing it in this vertical. It's a no-brainer, but it's hard. It is hard to get people to, quit smoking. It's hard to get people to exercise. It's hard to change people's behavior, and you have to nail things so perfectly right for it to kind of, for things to kind of hum. We had success very early, but I think the biggest gotcha moment for me, I guess, there's been so many, but the speed at which technology is built is actually not very fast at all.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we have a product roadmap. We know exactly what it is that we want to build, but there's so many ways to get there, and how you get there certainly impacts the rate at which people, grab onto the product. It could impact, could it delay the adoption? And so building product, building technology has taken so much longer than I thought. I thought we would be so much farther along than where we're at. And it's just, there's a process, and it's hard for industry people, for me to talk with industry people. They're like, oh, they get, when I sell the vision of what we're building, they get it.
Right.
But they're like, well, then why aren't you there?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I have to educate people on, well, it's not just a matter of building a quality tech platform. Takes it takes a lot of things to kind of happen. And so I don't know, that's been my biggest point of frustration, is just, it takes a long time.
Sure. Oh no. And especially if you're very forward thinking, that you're, why can't I get here right now? Come on now, come on now. And as you said, you were not the first to the game. You're first to this vertical, but not first to the game at all. And so, well, why can't I do this?
It's said that B2B marketplaces, it takes a good 5 to 8 years for them to be fully baked and fully humming. And so we're in year 3. We're just at the third year mark. And so it's almost like, I just read this other article the other day. It's like technology, when you're building technology, it's almost like building a cathedral, like what you're building, you're focusing on one small corner of it. You're laying down the foundation for future innovations. And so I tell my team, it's again, when building a marketplace, you have highs and lows every single day. And so the biggest challenge is to stay positive and stay upbeat. And so one of the things I was just telling my team, like, you guys, we are doing something genuinely that is going to change this industry. We don't know necessarily what role we'll play in terms of like the finished product, but I guarantee you what we're doing today will make a difference.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's actually a great way to look at it, not being so married to what the end result is going to be, that you can just consistently be in wherever you're at right now and get better at it right now and help people accept it right now. I mean, I think that's, again, looking back, not only at your industry, but really any industry, any B2B distribution space. I mean, I play in a lot of them. And one of the things I love is people talking about their own vertical market, how dysfunctional and fragmented and all this stuff. And I go, oh no, just look around, kid. You got to walk a mile in my shoes. By and large, distribution, B2B distribution is fragmented and it's messy and it's chaotic, and that's what makes it fun. And that's why you have margins, and that's why you get to play in this. And so I think, and it is so ripe for a technology disruption, no matter what you're in.
Yeah. The other thing that I would say, I wasn't anticipating this response. So that one of the biggest challenge for me is getting some feedback from industry folks where they're skeptical. And the story is told. I mean, technology, this problem, and this vertical's got a lot of problems that are all solvable with technology. And I'm just really trying to encourage people. And it tends to be some of the most successful companies out there that are the ones that are most resistant. And, I think success can breed total narrow-mindedness or complacency. It's just getting people in the industry to support change. And even if it's not my platform that they're supporting, like, that's okay. But get behind innovation, because that is what's truly going to help attract more talent to the industry, allow people to be more profitable. All boats rise with the tide. And I truly believe, hand over heart, that technology is going to usher in a positive future for this industry. I just want people to really promote it and support it. I've found that some are skeptical of it. And that kind of it frustrates me. So
it's like, oh, come on now, please. Can you just look through my eyes for a little bit? I think something just kind of occurred to me is, and maybe I'm going out on a limb. See, you're right. There are so many puns in your business. It's great. This is fun. But if I look at that, because this is an intangible product that you're selling, I mean, basically, and these folks work in tangible things, they go out, they see, touch, it's an emotional touching of that. That looking at software it's a difficult transition, because you can't see it, you can't touch it, and you have to go on blind faith in many cases. Yep.
That was also a big learning curve for me. And for those that I recruited from the industry, I brought over some folks from my legacy world, and it was a challenge to sell the software, to sell the intangible versus selling the product. And I'm still learning. I mean, I'm still learning how to sell the value prop of what Landscape Hub offers.
It's interesting. I had listened to an interview you did a little while ago, and I was sharing that with you. And one of the interviewers had said is, I wish you could do something with B2C. And I'm thinking, I just was shaking my head. I'm like, hold on. B2B is big enough. Just
Yes.
come on now. Help us
Yeah.
here.
Well, yeah. So, and I'm an entrepreneur through and through, and I would be lying if I didn't say, oh, wait, we have B2B2C is certainly part of the future of Landscape Hub. It absolutely is on the roadmap for those reasons that you just said. Like, there's an opportunity,
There
and
is.
by having the standardization, by having the supply chain digitized, our goal is to create the same marketplace that we are for the B2B side, for the B2C, or for the B2C part of the ecosystem as well. And so we think actually that we could repurpose a lot of what we're building now and apply it over there. So I agree. There's a lot of opportunity, and there's certainly a need. We want to help demystify that for homeowners as well.
Absolutely. No, I think that would be fantastic if you could tackle it. And man, you're right. That would be phenomenal. But the B2B has plenty of challenges left in it.
Yes.
You got a little bit of runway left.
Well, I mean, like, again, like, that's why I'm so blessed to have like the people on my team. Like, my job is to find opportunity. Is to, number one is to make sure we have capital. And number two is just to identify the opportunities. But my team, is there to help. We need to stay focused on the priorities at hand. And certainly B2B is, like you said, there's a lot of opportunity. And until we nail that, we're not going to venture out to solve any more problems outside of that part of the world, the vertical that we're in.
Before we wrap up here, as I can see our time is starting to get a little short, if you could give advice to someone in their family business, someone that is in your situation and they see that there is a potential to maybe to change the direction or even change the direction of their industry, what would you tell them? How do you make that first break, or how do you begin to, again, leave that comfort of that family business that, put you through school, put you through, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in the same boat, but how do you break away, or at least how do you maybe even incubate inside of your own company?
Yeah. So that, guys, there's a lot of things there. I mean, number one, I think you need to certainly think through the opportunity or the idea and see if it's something that can be incubated, and can it live within the legacy business. If it can, then you have to ask yourself the question, like, do you want it to stay there, or is this gonna fulfill a quest that you have to break away from your family company? I mean, that it just depends on your situation. For me, Landscape Hub, I could not have incubated. Well, we certainly did incubate it at Fiore, but it had to be its own entity. And after a lot of discernment, a lot of thinking, a lot of conversation, a lot of strategic thought around it, it became clear that this was our path. And that involved business advisors, that involved conversations with attorneys, that involved conversations, of course, with my family. And it requires a lot of thoughtfulness and open and honest conversation, and be transparent. Everything that we did, everything that in the early days of Landscape Hub, I mean, my family was very much aware of the direction that we were taking, and I got their sign off. I got their blessings. For me, it was really important. And I still feel guilty for leaving the company that I helped grow, and I still have relationships over there, but I am out, like I have an ownership position, but I am out of the day to day. And I almost needed that. It was important that there was a separation, but I think it's important to have it be transparent, so there's no hard feelings, and have that be part of the conversation, and try to get it to a point where there's consensus and blessing versus, kind of breaking.
Perfect. Yeah. I definitely feel that, as I left my family business as well, there were things that needed to be said and needed to, make sure that, you still had the support, because I think, even if you do break away, having the support of that family from a blessing standpoint or just a mentorship standpoint, so critical. Absolutely critical.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time with me. This has been fantastic, and I'm so excited to see where you go with this. This is it's a phenomenal departure, and really, I'm thrilled that you are tackling something that's pretty tough. This is a big one.
It is a big one, and it's been crazy. It's been exhausting, but it's been the best ride of my life. And it's really great to get reconnected with you, Jason, because I still believe this vertical and all the stakeholders in it would benefit from from your sage advice of best practices of running their business. So I hope you and I can reconnect, and again, everyone would benefit from hearing your best practices.
All right. Well, I've got opinions, so I will be happy to share them. Well, with that, Lisa, again, I truly appreciate your time, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. You take care.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.